Here's something that almost never happens. A sitting American president commander-in-chief, the most powerful person on earth, triggers a wave of public concern, not because of a scandal, not because of a legislative defeat, not because of a foreign policy crisis, but because of the question people are now saying out loud, in polling data, in private conversations, and increasingly in public. Is he okay? The thread, consider this one number. In a recent Reuters/Ipsos poll, only about 1 in 4 Americans said that Donald Trump was even-tempered. That is not a partisan number. That is not a Democratic number or a Republican number. That is a signal. And once you notice it, it becomes very hard to unnotice. Because here is the thing about even-tempered. It is not a complex policy question. It is not a matter of ideology or values or which side of the aisle you sit on. It is a basic behavioral observation. And roughly 3 out of 4 Americans, looking at the President of the United States during wartime, during an active military conflict with Iran, looked at what they saw and said, number, that does not describe what I am watching. So, what are they watching? The backstory: Donald Trump has always defied conventional behavioral expectations for the office. That's not a secret. His first term was defined in part by a governing style that his own advisors, on the record and off, described as chaotic, impulsive, and resistant to briefings. His supporters called it unconventional. His critics called it something else. But even in that context, even accounting for everything we already knew, the numbers we're looking at now are different. 58% of Americans in this same Reuters/Ipsos poll said the phrase mentally sharp did not describe the president very well or at all. And here is the detail that stops you. Roughly half of respondents said his mental sharpness has gotten worse over the past year. Not static, not always this way. Worse? That is a trajectory. And trajectories, unlike snapshots, have direction. The backdrop to all of this is not nothing. The United States is currently engaged in military operations against Iran. The stakes of executive decision-making have rarely been higher in a generation. The person making those decisions is the one that more than half the country now says is less mentally sharp than he was a year ago. The paper trail lets walk through what we actually know. The Reuters/Ipsos poll is a nationally conducted survey with a broad sample. It is not a fringe data point from a partisan outlet. It is a methodologically standard snapshot of American public opinion, and what it shows is consistent across multiple lines of inquiry, not just one. Start with the even-tempered finding. Only about 25% of Americans use that description. Now, cross that against the mental sharpness numbers. 58% say those words don't describe him well, or at all. And then layer in the trend question, roughly half say it has declined over the past year specifically. You are not looking at one number. You are looking at 3 interlocking data points that point in the same direction. What makes this notable is what it is not. This is not a job approval rating, which is ideologically filtered through partisan loyalty. This is not a policy question where disagreement is expected and healthy. These are observational assessments. Behavioral, cognitive, the kind of thing that people notice not because they were asked to evaluate a policy, but because they have been watching and what they have seen is registered. Notice, too, the timing. These responses were gathered against the backdrop of an Iran war, a period when presidential communication, clarity, and steadiness is not just preferable, but operationally necessary. Foreign leaders are watching. Military commanders are waiting on orders. Intelligence assessments land on the resolute desk. And the American public, asked to characterize the man receiving all of that, is returning answers that should give anyone pause. The revelation. Here is where it all clicks. This is not a story about politics. It is not a story about whether you supported Trump in the last election or the one before, or whether you think his Iran policy is right or wrong. This is a story about a fundamental question of fitness that the American public, unprompted, uncoached across partisan lines, is now raising in quantifiable, documented, poll-tested terms. When 3/4 of Americans in a country cleaved almost perfectly in half politically agree? Agree that a president is not even temperate. That is not a political opinion. That is a consensus. And when that consensus is forming in real time during a war around a man with sole authority over the American nuclear arsenal and the ability to commit U.S. forces to combat, that is not something we should be quiet about. Why it matters now, and here's the part that should concern all of us, regardless of party. The 25th Amendment to the Constitution exists precisely for moments like this one. Section 4 of that amendment provides a mechanism for the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to transmit a declaration that the president is unable to discharge the duties of his office. It has never been invoked, not once in American history. That is not because the question has never come up. It has come up in the final days of the Nixon presidency. It came up in the aftermath of the Reagan assassination attempt. It came up. What has always prevented it is a combination of political will, institutional hesitation, and the absence of sufficient public concern to create the necessary pressure. What we are looking at now in these poll numbers is the public concern part of that equation beginning to materialize in a way it has not before. The Iran conflict is not a drill. Decisions made in the next weeks and months will have consequences that extend years beyond this administration. The allies and adversaries shaping their behavior around American signals, around presidential statements, executive orders, and military posture are not waiting for the next news cycle. They are deciding right now how seriously to take what comes out of Washington. And the American people, asked to assess the source of those signals, have delivered a verdict that is quiet, methodical, and deeply unsettling. Open questions here is what we don't yet know. We don't know whether the White House medical team, the physician to the president, has observed changes consistent with what the public is describing, and if so, what has been disclosed, to whom and when. Presidential medical records are not public. The public physician's letter is a tradition, not a legal requirement. There is a gap there, a real one. We don't know whether the people closest to this president, the cabinet secretaries who attend the National Security Council meetings, who receive the same briefings, who sit in the room, are looking at the same behavior the American public is describing, and what, if anything, they are doing about it. That conversation, if it is happening behind closed doors. Whether it should stay there is a question this democracy has not yet been forced to fully answer. Sign off the country is at war, and a significant majority of Americans are no longer certain the person directing it is the person they thought they elected.